The crimson sky of Etheresia blazed with twin suns, as Jackson Vega fought desperately with his ship's failing controls. Warning lights bathed the cockpit in angry red as his cargo hauler, Wandering Star, spiraled toward the planet's surface like a wounded bird. "Come on, you piece of junk," Jackson muttered through gritted teeth, his weathered hands dancing across the control panel. At 32, he'd been flying freight routes through the outer systems for over a decade, but he'd never encountered an electromagnetic storm quite like this one. The planet's atmosphere seemed to be actively fighting his ship's electronics, causing cascading system failures throughout the vessel. The ground rushed up to meet him with terrifying speed. Jackson caught glimpses of an alien landscape through the cracked viewport crystalline formations that seemed to pulse with inner light, vast forests of silver trees that swayed without wind, and structures that defied human understanding of architecture. This was his first time seeing Etheresia up close, and he'd never imagined it would be his last. The impact came with a bone-jarring crunch of metal and ceramic. Jackson's restraints cut into his chest as the ship plowed through the crystalline ground, leaving a trail of sparks and debris in its wake. The world spun violently before coming to an abrupt halt against what felt like a massive tree. Darkness claimed him. When consciousness returned, Jackson expected pain, cold, and the acrid smell of burning electronics. Instead, he found himself wrapped in warmth that seemed to penetrate not just his body, but his very soul. A soft, melodic humming filled the air around him, and he felt as though he were floating in a sea of liquid starlight. He opened his eyes slowly, expecting to see the twisted wreckage of his cockpit. Instead, he found himself gazing up at the most beautiful being he had ever encountered. For despite her alien nature, her essence felt undeniably feminine hovered above him. Her form composed of what appeared to be living light. Her skin, if it could be called skin, shimmered with an opalescent glow that shifted between silver and gold, where a human might have hair. Flowing tendrils of pure luminescence cascaded down her shoulders like captured aurora. Her eyes were the most striking feature of all deep pools of swirling starlight that seemed to hold the wisdom of eons. Jackson tried to speak, but found his voice barely a whisper. His throat felt raw, as if he'd been breathing smoke. The luminous being tilted her head, studying him with those incredible eyes. When she spoke, her voice was like wind chimes caught in a gentle breeze, musical and otherworldly. Though he couldn't understand her words, the tone conveyed concern and gentleness. Jackson tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through his ribs. The being he'd decided to think of her as female, based on her graceful movements, immediately pressed a hand to his chest. Her touch was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Where her fingers made contact, warmth spread through him, easing the pain and filling him with a sense of profound peace. "Thank you," he whispered, not caring that she couldn't understand him. The gratitude in his voice seemed to transcend language barriers. She smiled then, and Jackson felt his heart skip a beat. Her smile was radiant, literally her entire form brightened with joy, causing the chamber around them to glow more intensely. For the first time, Jackson could see his surroundings clearly. He lay on what appeared to be a bed made of woven starlight, within a chamber carved from living crystal. The walls pulsed gently with bioluminescent patterns, creating an atmosphere of serene beauty. Plants that looked like they belonged in an underwater garden grew from the floor and walls, their fronds swaying in an unfelt current and casting dancing shadows in the ethereal light. "Where am I?" Jackson asked, though he suspected she wouldn't understand. To his surprise, she gestured toward herself and spoke a single word that sounded like music itself. "Nixa." Her name. She was telling him her name. "Nixa," he repeated carefully, savoring the way it felt on his tongue. Her form brightened even more at hearing him speak her name, and she nodded enthusiastically. He pointed to himself. "Jackson, Jackson," she said slowly, her musical voice transforming his simple human name into something beautiful. She repeated it several more times, each pronunciation slightly different, as if she were exploring the sound. Over the following hours or perhaps days, for time seemed to move differently in this place, Nix attended to his injuries, with a combination of advanced technology and what could only be described as healing magic. Her touch accelerated his body's natural healing processes, and the pain that should have laid him up for weeks faded to manageable levels within what felt like a single sleep cycle. During his recovery, Jackson found himself studying Nixa with growing fascination. She moved with fluid grace, her luminescent form shifting and flowing as she attended to various tasks. Around the chamber, sometimes she seemed nearly solid, her light coalescing into a form that could manipulate physical objects. Other times she became more ethereal, her essence diffusing like fog until only her consciousness seemed to remain, communicated through gentle touches of light against his skin. She was clearly intelligent, possessing technology that far exceeded anything in human space. The healing devices she used were seamlessly integrated into the living crystal walls, and the chamber itself seemed to respond to her thoughts and emotions, adjusting temperature and lighting to maintain optimal comfort. But beyond her obvious sophistication, what struck Jackson most was her kindness. Despite the fact that he was clearly an alien intruder on her world, she had saved his life and continued to care for him with a tenderness that transcended species barriers. When he grew restless, she would hum those beautiful melodies that seemed to calm his very soul. When he appeared hungry, she would provide strange but nourishing substances that tasted like liquid sunshine. As his strength returned, Jackson began to worry about his ship and his missed cargo delivery. But more than that, he found himself reluctant to leave this magical place and the extraordinary being who had become his savior. Every moment spent in Nix's presence felt like a gift, and the thought of returning to his lonely existence among the cold stars filled him with unexpected sadness. He didn't yet know that Nixa was experiencing the same conflicted emotions, or that their chance meeting would set in motion events that would change not just their lives, but the destiny of two entire species. 3 days had passed since Jackson's awakening, and the invisible barriers between species seemed to dissolve a little more with each shared moment. The morning found him sitting cross-legged on the crystalline floor, watching in fascination as Nix attended to her garden of light plants. Her movements were poetry in motion, each gesture causing the bioluminescent flora to respond with gentle waves of color. "Beautiful," Jackson whispered, though he wasn't sure if he meant the garden or Nixa herself. She turned at the sound of his voice, and her form rippled with what he had learned to recognize as pleasure. Over the past few days, he'd begun to understand that Nix's emotional states were reflected in the intensity and hue of her luminescence. Joy made her shine like a miniature star, while concentration dimmed her glow to a soft, focused beam. Nixa glided over to him, her feet barely touching the ground. She knelt beside him and placed her hand over his heart. The warmth of her touch sent electricity through his entire body, but more than that, he felt something extraordinary happen. Images began to flow between them, not visual exactly, but emotional impressions that bypassed the need for words. Through their connection, Jackson sensed Nix's wonder at his presence. She had never encountered a being like him before, solid where she was ethereal, dark where she was light, yet somehow perfectly complementary. He felt her curiosity about his world, his ship, his solitary existence among the stars. In return, Jackson projected his own amazement at her beauty and kindness. He shared the loneliness he'd carried for years, flying cargo routes through empty space with only the distant stars for company. He showed her how her healing touch had done more than mend his broken ribs. It had begun to heal something in his soul he hadn't even realized was wounded. Nix's eyes widened as the emotional exchange deepened. Her luminescence fluctuated wildly, cycling through colors Jackson had no names for. She pulled her hand back suddenly, her form flickering with what looked like confusion or fear. "What's wrong?" Jackson reached for her, but she drifted backward, shaking her head. Before she could respond, the chamber's entrance shimmered and another Etheresian materialized. This newcomer was smaller than Nixa, with a more angular form and a light that pulsed in sharp, agitated patterns. Where Nix's essence felt warm and welcoming, this being radiated concern and barely contained alarm. The new rival spoke rapidly in the musical Etheresian language, their tone clearly urgent. Nixa responded in kind, her own voice taking on defensive notes, though Jackson couldn't understand the words. The tension in the air was unmistakable. "Nixa," Jackson stood slowly, not wanting to appear threatening. "Is everything all right?" The stranger's attention snapped to him, and Jackson felt the weight of an intense, analytical gaze. After a moment, the being spoke directly to him, their voice higher and more crystalline than Nix's melodic tones. "I am Zephyr Star Whisper," they said in heavily accented but understandable galactic standard. "And you, human, are a complication we cannot afford." Jackson blinked in surprise. "You speak my language. Some of us study the outlying species." Zephyr replied curtly, "It is necessary for defense purposes." Their form pulsed with agitation as they continued. "Do you have any idea what you've done? What you're asking of her?" "I haven't asked for anything," Jackson protested. "I'm grateful for Nix's help, but I never intended. Intention is irrelevant." Zephyr interrupted, the bond forming between you goes against everything we are taught about your kind. Humans are destroyers, consumers. You take what you need and leave nothing but emptiness behind. The harsh words stung, but Jackson forced himself to remain calm. "I'm not here to destroy anything. My ship crashed. Nixa saved my life. I'm grateful, nothing more." Zephyr's laugh was like the tinkling of broken glass. "Nothing more? Then why? Does she glow like a newborn star whenever you speak? Why has she been singing the harmony of deep bonding in her sleep?" Jackson turned to Nixa, who had retreated to the far wall of the chamber. Her luminescence was muted now, embarrassment and confusion swirling in her aura. The revelation that she had been singing about him filled Jackson with an unexpected warmth. "Nixa," he said softly, moving toward her despite Zephyr's disapproving pulse. "Is that true?" She nodded slowly, her form flickering between bright and dim as conflicting emotions warred within her. When she spoke, it was in her own language, but Jackson didn't need translation to understand the vulnerability in her voice. Zephyr translated reluctantly. "She says she has never felt anything like what happens when you touch, that your emotions call to hers across the void between species, that she dreams of your world of metal and darkness and finds it beautiful. Because you are there." The chamber fell silent except for the gentle humming of the crystal walls. Jackson felt his heart racing as he processed Nix's confession. The feelings he'd been trying to deny, the way his pulse quickened when she smiled, the completeness he felt in her presence, the growing certainty that he never wanted to leave this place suddenly made perfect sense. "Nixa," he whispered, taking another step toward her. "I feel it too." Her form blazed brighter than he'd ever seen, filling the chamber with radiant joy. But Zephyr darted between them, their own light flashing in warning patterns. "This madness must stop," Zephyr declared. "The elders speak of humans planning to harvest our world's essence. They prepare for war, and you," they pointed at Jackson, "are evidence of human infiltration. If they discover you here, if they learn that Nixa has been harboring you, what would happen?" Jackson asked, though he dreaded the answer. "She would be stripped of her light," Zephyr said quietly, "made into a shade, neither living nor dead. It is the ultimate punishment for betraying our people." Nixa spoke urgently, her words tumbling over each other in musical cascades. Zephyr listened, their form growing more agitated with each phrase. "She says she doesn't care." Zephyr translated with obvious reluctance, "that some connections transcend species, transcend law, that the light you've kindled in each other is worth any risk." Jackson felt his chest tighten with emotion. Without conscious thought, he reached out to Nixa, offering his hand. She looked at it for a long moment, then at Zephyr's disapproving form, before making her choice. The moment their fingers touched, the chamber exploded with light. Not just Nix's luminescence, but something new, a resonance between their very beings that painted the crystal walls in colors neither species had ever seen. Jackson felt Nix's essence intertwining with his own, her light flowing through him, while his solid presence anchored her ethereal form. In that moment of perfect connection, they shared more than emotions or memories. They shared souls. When the light finally faded, Zephyr stared at them in stunned silence. The geometric patterns on the chamber walls had changed, incorporating swirling designs that seemed to represent both human engineering and Etherian artistry, a visual representation of the bond between Jackson and Nixa. By the first light, Zephyr breathed. "What have you done? This level of resonance, it's only theoretical." The elders said it was impossible between different species. Jackson and Nixa looked at each other, both still feeling the echo of their profound connection. Whatever had just happened between them had changed something fundamental, created something unprecedented. "Then maybe," Jackson said softly, "it's time for the elders to learn something new." But even as the words left his mouth, warning chimes began to sound throughout the chamber. Zephyr's form went rigid with terror. "They're coming," Zephyr whispered. "The council guard." Someone detected the resonance. We have moments before the chamber entrance burst open, admitting several Etheresian beings whose light burned with the cold intensity of stars. Their leader's voice boomed through the crystal space, speaking words Jackson didn't understand, but whose meaning was unmistakable. They had been discovered. The council guard's leader stepped forward, their form radiating authority and cold disapproval. Unlike Nix's warm golden glow or Zephyr's agitated flickering, this being's light was pure white, unwavering and harsh as the surface of a neutron star. When they spoke, their voice carried the weight of absolute judgment. "Elder Cosmic Dream Weaver requests your immediate presence. Nixa Moon Weaver," they announced in the formal tones of official business. "Both of you." Jackson felt Nix's fear through their new connection, a cold tendril of terror that wrapped around his heart. Whatever this Elder Cosmic Dream Weaver represented, it was not good news for their forbidden bond. "I'll come alone," Jackson said, stepping forward. "This isn't Nix's fault. I'm the intruder here." The guard leader's attention fixed on him with laser intensity. "You will both come. The resonance you created has been felt across 3 continents. The consequences of your connection affect us all." The journey to the Etheresian capital was unlike anything Jackson had ever experienced. Zephyr and the guards surrounded them in a formation that was part escort, part prison convoy. As they traveled through crystalline corridors that seemed to exist in a space between dimensions, the walls showed glimpses of the world outside, vast cities of living light, forests where each tree was a being of pure energy, oceans that sparkled with the consciousness of water spirits. Nixa stayed close to Jackson during the transit, her luminescence muted with anxiety. Occasionally their hands would brush, and the brief contact would send reassuring warmth between them. But they dared not attempt the deeper connection that had revealed them. The capital itself defied description. It rose from the planet's surface like a symphony, made visible spiraling towers of crystallized music, bridges of solidified light, and at its heart, a massive structure that pulsed with the collected wisdom of millennia. This was the Hall of Eternal Thought, where the Etheresian elders contemplated the great questions of existence. Elder Cosmic Dream Weaver awaited them in a chamber whose walls showed the swirling patterns of galactic formation. The elder was ancient beyond measure, their form so refined by eons of existence that they appeared as little more than a constellation of twinkling lights ranged in the vague suggestion of consciousness. So, the elder's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "The human finally reveals itself. I didn't mean to cause any trouble," Jackson began. But the elder's attention had already shifted to Nixa. "Child of the light, do you understand what you have done? The resonance patterns we detected suggest a bonding deeper than anything recorded in our histories. You have shared your essence with a being of darkness and metal." Nix's form flared with defiance. When she spoke, her musical voice carried new harmonics of strength and determination. Even without translation, Jackson could hear her defending their connection. The elder listened in silence before responding with what sounded like profound sadness. "You speak of love transcending species barriers, but you are naive, young one. We have been monitoring human activities in this sector for some time. Their true purpose here is not trade or exploration." With a gesture, the elder caused the chamber walls to display images that made Jackson's blood run cold. Human ships, dozens of them, ranged in military formation at the edge of the system. Massive harvesting equipment designed to drain energy from living worlds, and worst of all, briefing documents clearly marked with the seal of human command, detailing plans for the systematic exploitation of Etheresia's unique energy matrix. Your people call it Operation Starfall, the elder continued, their attention fixed on Jackson's horrified expression. The extraction of our world's life force to power your expanding empire. Did you know of this? Human, was your crash merely reconnaissance for the coming invasion? No, Jackson whispered, shaking his head in denial. I'm just a cargo pilot. I had no idea, but even as he spoke, fragments of memory surfaced in usual military traffic at the stations where he'd picked up supplies. Hushed conversations between officers, the electromagnetic interference that had brought down his ship. Had he been used as an unwitting scout? The elder's form pulsed with something that might have been pity. Perhaps you were ignorant of your role, but ignorance does not change the reality. Your species has declared war on ours through their actions, and you, despite any personal feelings, are their advance agent. Meanwhile, in the sterile confines of a human outpost orbiting Etheresia's largest moon, Military Officer Thorne Blackstone stood before a holographic display, showing the same energy readings that had alarmed the Etheresian Council. Unlike the flowing elegance of Etheresian architecture, the human station was all sharp angles and functional design, a monument to efficiency over beauty. Sir, the energy spike we detected suggests the natives have some kind of advanced communication network, reported the technician monitoring the readings. The resonance patterns are unlike anything we've encountered. Thorne studied the data with the cold calculation that had made him one of the most effective officers in the colonial fleet. At 45, he had overseen the subjugation of 7 worlds, always finding the most efficient method to extract their resources while minimizing human casualty. Any word from Pilot Vega? Thorne asked. Jackson's disappearance 3 days ago had been noted, but not investigated. Lone cargo pilots were expendable, and the electromagnetic storms around Etheresia made crashes commonplace. No, sir. His ship's transponder went dark shortly after entering the atmosphere. We've assumed he was lost. Thorne nodded absently, his attention focused on the energy readings. If the Etheresians possessed technology capable of generating such power levels, it would make their world even more valuable than initial surveys had indicated. Prepare a communication buoy, he ordered. Full encryption. Send word to fleet. Command that we may need to accelerate our timeline for Operation Starfall. If the natives are becoming aware of our presence, we should move before they can mount an effective defense. Back in the Hall of Eternal Thought, Jackson found himself caught between horror at his species' plans and desperate love for the being beside him. Nyx's luminescence had dimmed to barely perceptible levels. As the weight of revelation settled over them both, there must be another way, Jackson said, his voice hoarse with emotion. Not all humans are like this. There are those who would welcome peaceful contact, who would see the beauty in what you've created here. Perhaps, the elder acknowledged, but they are not the ones coming with harvesting ships and weapons of mass destruction. The humans who approach our world see only resources to be consumed. What can we do? Nyxa asked, her voice barely audible. The elder's response carried the weight of eons of wisdom and an equal measure of sorrow. You face an impossible choice. Children, Nyxa, you must choose between your people and your heart. Will you stand with us against the human invasion, knowing it means destroying the one you love? And you, human, will you warn your people of our defenses, betraying the one who saved your life? Or will you stand with her, making yourself a traitor to your own kind? The chamber fell silent except for the subtle humming of the crystalline walls. Jackson felt Nyx's anguish through their connection, a pain so profound it made his own heartbreak seem small by comparison. She was being asked to choose between love and loyalty, between personal happiness and the survival of her entire civilization. There is a third option, Jackson said slowly, an idea forming in his mind. What if we could find a way to stop the invasion without violence? What if we could show both our peoples that cooperation is possible? The elder's form flickered with what might have been amusement or despair. You speak of miracles. Human, your military moves with the inexorable force of a collapsing star, and our people have prepared for centuries to defend against such threats. The momentum toward war may be too great for even love to overcome. But even as the elder spoke, Jackson felt Nyx's hand slip into his. their connection flaring with renewed hope and determination. Whatever the cost, whatever the risk, they would not let their peoples destroy each other without a fight. The choice had been made. Now they would have to live with the consequences. The war began at dawn. Jackson woke to the sound of distant explosions echoing through Nyx's sanctuary, each blast making the crystalline walls shudder with sympathetic vibrations. Through their bond, he felt Nyx's terror spike as energy beams lanced down from orbit, striking the outer districts of the Etheresian capital with surgical precision. "They're targeting the power nodes," Nyxa whispered, her form flickering between solid and ethereal as panic overwhelmed her control. "Without them, our people will lose their connection to the planetary consciousness." Jackson pulled on his salvaged flight suit, his mind racing through tactical assessments he'd hoped never to need. 3 days had passed since their audience with Elder Cosmic Dreamweaver. 3 days of planning and preparation that now seemed woefully inadequate against the reality of full-scale invasion. "The orbital strikes are just the beginning," he said grimly, checking the charge on the energy weapon Zephyr had reluctantly provided. "They'll be sending ground forces next heavy assault troops, designed to occupy your cities while the harvesting equipment drains your world's essence." Through the sanctuary's walls, they could see streams of Etheresian defenders rising into the sky like living meteors, their combined light forming geometric patterns of breathtaking beauty and terrible purpose. The planet itself seemed to be awakening, its crystalline formations pulsing with defensive energies that made the very air shimmer with power. But even as the Etheresians mobilized their forces, human dropships were breaking through the atmosphere like falling stars of metal and fire. The first wave carried atmospheric processors designed to make the air breathable for human troops. The second wave would bring the soldiers themselves. "We have to do something," Nyxa said, her musical voice tight with desperation. "There has to be a way to stop this madness before both our peoples destroy each other." Before Jackson could respond, the sanctuary's entrance blazed with familiar light as Zephyr materialized, their form pulsing with urgent patterns. "The Council has issued a summons," they announced breathlessly. "All Etheresians are to join the planetary defense, and you," they turned to Jackson, "are to be held as a hostage against human aggression." "No." Nyxa stepped protectively in front of Jackson, her luminescence flaring with fierce determination. "I won't let them use him as a bargaining chip. The choice is not yours to make," Zephyr replied sadly. "The war has begun, and personal feelings cannot be allowed to." Their words were cut off as the sanctuary's walls suddenly blazed with an incoming transmission, not Etheresian communication patterns, but the harsh electromagnetic pulse of human military signals. The holographic image that appeared was one Jackson recognized with a sinking heart. Captain Raven Stormwind stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Iron Destiny, her silver hair pulled back in the severe style favored by colonial fleet officers. At 52, she was a legend in the service, a brilliant tactician who had never lost a campaign and never left a soldier behind. She had also been Jackson's commanding officer during his military service years ago, before he'd mustered out to become a civilian pilot. "Attention, inhabitants of Etheresia." Captain Stormwind's voice carried the authority of absolute command. "This world has been claimed by the Human Colonial Authority under Mandate 847, Resource Acquisition for Species Survival. You will cease all hostile actions and submit to orderly relocation. 2 designated preservation zones." Jackson felt sick. Preservation zones, he'd heard that euphemism before. Concentration camps where conquered populations were held, while their worlds were stripped of anything valuable. But Raven wasn't finished. "We have detected the presence of human citizen Jackson Vega on your world. Mr. Vega, if you can hear this transmission, you are ordered to report to the nearest human outpost for immediate extraction. Failure to comply will result in your classification as a defector and enemy combatant." The transmission cut off, leaving the sanctuary in stunned silence. Jackson stared at the space where Raven's image had been, his mind reeling from the implications. His former commander hadn't just found him, she was offering him a way out, a chance to return to his own kind before the real fighting began. "You should go," Nyxa said quietly, though her entire form dimmed with barely contained anguish. "This is your chance to survive. to be with your own people where you belong. My people. Jackson repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. The same people who are about to commit genocide against yours. He turned to face her fully, taking her luminous hands in his solid ones. I made my choice 3 days ago, Nixa. I choose you. I choose us. Their connection flared with shared emotion, love, fear, determination, and beneath it all, an unshakable certainty that they belong together regardless of the chaos erupting around them. Then you're both fools, Zephyr said, but their tone carried more sorrow than anger. The council will never accept a human ally, and your people will hunt you as a traitor. You're choosing exile from both civilizations. Then we'll make our own civilization, Jackson replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. There have to be others on both sides who want peace instead of war. We'll find them. The sanctuary shook as another orbital bombardment struck nearby, and through the walls they could see the distinctive energy signature of Etheresian warforms, engaging human dropships in aerial combat. The battle for Etheresia's future had begun in earnest. The resistance cells, Nixa said suddenly, her eyes brightening with inspiration. There are Etheresians who believe in coexistence, who think the old ways of isolation are wrong, and humans, to scientists, explorers, people who came to the frontier for discovery rather than conquest. Zephyr's form flickered with what might have been hope. The underground networks. I've heard whispers of mixed settlements on the outer worlds, places where different species work together. But reaching them, we'll find a way. Jackson said firmly, first, we need to get off-world. My ship is beyond repair, but there might be other options. Their planning was interrupted by the arrival of Etheresian council guards, their forms blazing with the cold light of official authority. Behind them came human soldiers in full combat armor, their weapons trained on the sanctuary's entrance. Somehow, impossibly, the two forces had found them at the same time. Surrender the human, demanded the Etheresian leader. Stand down and release our citizen, ordered the human squad commander. Caught between the two groups, Jackson and Nixa looked at each other and came to the same realization simultaneously. There would be no negotiation, no peaceful resolution. Both sides wanted to use them as symbols, proof that the other species could not be trusted, justification for the violence that was already consuming both worlds. Together, Nixa asked, her form beginning to gather energy for what Jackson recognized as a combat configuration. Together, he confirmed, raising his weapon. What followed was chaos. Nixa erupted in blinding light, her form expanding into a living weapon of pure energy that sent both human and Etheresian forces scrambling for cover. Jackson fought beside her, his solid presence anchoring her power while his tactical knowledge guided their movements. They carved a path through the confusion, neither side expecting them to resist. In the heat of battle, their bond deepened beyond anything they had experienced before. They moved as one being, thought as one mind, fought as one heart divided between two forms. When the smoke cleared, they stood alone among the unconscious forms of soldiers from both species, living proof that love could indeed transcend the boundaries of war. But they were also now fugitives from both civilizations, with nowhere to run except toward an uncertain future among the stars. Hand in luminous hand, they walked toward the wreckage of Jackson's ship, where a desperate plan was beginning to form. If they could reach the resistance networks Nixa had mentioned, if they could find others who believed in cooperation over conquest, perhaps their love could become the foundation for something greater. Behind them, the war raged on, but ahead lay the possibility of peace.